The first day I rode this bike, I didn't really get it. The second day I rode it, I started to get it. By the end of the third day, we understood each other and I wanted to own this bike. Hi, I'm Steve, welcome to Stand Up Moto, and this is my review of the BMW R18 Classic. Now this review came about from a viewer's request. I've had a couple asking for me to review the R18. So I reached out to my friends at Moto Adelaide here in South Australia, and they presented me with this beautiful 2024 R18 Classic. And no matter where you are in the world, if you have a dealership that is prepared to give reviewers like myself bikes to review, so as we can bring reviews to you on YouTube, support those dealerships. That's what makes this sort of thing possible, isn't it? Now, I said in my introduction that on the first day I didn't really get this bike, and that's because my head was stuck in generic V-twin cruiser mode. And I can tell you this bike is anything but generic. At the heart of the R18, you've got this beautiful big 1,800cc, actually 1,802cc boxer twin that is just full of character. If you're into the cubic inches, that's 110 cubic inches. It's air-cooled, fuel-injected, 4 valves per cylinder. It's ride-by-wire, so there's no throttle cables or anything. It is a crisp, instantaneous throttle response. 0 to 100k times are pretty good. That's a little over 60 mile an hour. You'll see my traction control light come on here as I get a little bit of wheel spin, but for a cruiser, pretty good. So 100 kilometers an hour, a little over 60 mile an hour, that's at the top of the dial there in this shot. It managed to get there in second gear at 4,750-ish RPM. That is maximum horsepower at those revs. Maximum torque comes in at 3,000 RPM, and I'll cover those shortly when we talk a little bit more about the motor, but pretty impressive. It has an oil cooler mounted down the front low here. That just cools the oil that's circulating around in the motor. It's a wet sump motor, so you don't have a separate oil tank where you have to start the motor and pump the oil up and then dip your oil. It's nice, it's simple. It has an oil window down on the side, and if you've seen my previous videos, you'll know I love an oil window. It's just so simple to live with your motorcycle. Whether you're home, out and about, you just stand the bike up, you can look at the oil window and have a look and check your oil level is right. One of the other things I'm going to cover in this video is maintenance. And I think you'll be blown away at just how simple this bike is to maintain. And when I say that, I mean as in do-it-yourself maintenance. It is a very simple bike, and that's pretty unusual in 2024. Up the front, twin 300mm, that's about 12-inch rotors. Dual 4-piston calipers, dual rotors, and as you would expect from a BMW, I mean, I would expect nothing less, it pulls up really well. Remembering that this bike comes in at 365-ish kilograms wet, that's getting up around that 800-pound mark, and it really does stop well. As I just shuffle my way back through the gears here, one of the things you may have noticed in that shot, the hazard lights automatically come on under emergency braking. One of the things I noticed riding this bike, one of my bikes is a cruiser, and it has forward controls, as most cruisers do. By that I mean your foot pegs are out the front here, and you tend to get this arch in your back when you're riding them, and the wrong series of bumps, it can really jar you up the lower back. With the R18, because of these huge big cylinder heads, it doesn't have foot pegs right up the front here, or forward controls, whatever you want to call it. They've got the foot boards, only a small board, but a footboard back here. You sit more of an upright position as you would in a chair or maybe in your motor car or something like that. And you don't get that buck effect. One of the first things I noticed when I started riding this on rougher type roads, it is superbly comfortable. You'll see in this shot here as I go past the car, BMW refer to this as an active riding position. But have a look at the angle of my knees, my back, everything is at right angles. You're not slumped over the bike. And I think they call it active because you are ready to hit that brake pedal. You're not reaching for it in the case of an emergency. Front forks, 49mm, right way up, telescopic fork. They're non-adjustable, but BMW have got the compression and rebound set up just right for the weight of this bike. You've got this sleeve over effect here. Now this is much the same as my 52 Norton Dominator, one of my bikes. Actually, I'm wearing my Norton t-shirt today. This is my 1952 Norton Dominator, and you can see that same sleeve over effect that protects the upper section of the fork. It also looks good, albeit somewhat smaller back then. It just looks so neat and tidy, and it really suits the look of this bike. Something you can't see in this shot. Underneath here, you've got a little steering damper. So when you're on those really horrible roads that are pushing you all over the place, the steering damper just takes that rock out of the bars. That's nice. About 5 inches of travel, plenty for this bike. One of the other things you notice is the seat height. Now I'm 5'10", I'm taller in the body and shorter in the legs, but I mean, this is so flat-footed, 710mm or 28 inches. It is so low when you sit down in the bike. I mean, look at that. You can get your legs right out. And of course, that gives you so much stability when you're at the lights or just moving the bike around. Rear brakes, you can see the pedal there. Nice chrome pedal. There's your master cylinder for the rear brakes, once again with a little window on the side, so it's nice and easy to see. It's not tucked away or hidden somewhere underneath the bike. It's back to that simplicity thing. One of the other standout features on this bike is the drive shaft. Now, normally that's enclosed in a steel tube or in a casting or something like that. Being a larger BMW, of course, it's shaft driven. But what they've done here, they've chrome plated the drive shaft. There's the universal joint and everything, and it's all exposed. You can see that turning around. That just looks lovely. On the Classic, you have 16-inch front and rear. It's an alloy rim with chrome spokes in the rim, and it's a big tyre on the back. It's a 180/65, and I don't think we mentioned at the front, it's a 130/90. It's a big tyre on the front as well. And you can see down in there the rear brake rotor. That again is a 300mm or a 12-inch rotor on the back. And unusually on a rear, it's got a 4-piston caliper. The rear brakes work very, very well. And that's important on a cruiser. A lot of bikes you wouldn't use the rears very much, but on a cruiser you do tend to use the rears a bit. Nice, strong, powerful rear braking. One of the other things that we rarely associate with new motorcycles nowadays is simplicity, and I'll run through the maintenance on this bike. It is so straightforward. I'll do that shortly, but the side covers. Firstly, metal. Pull that off, 4 little plugs. Okay, we're used to seeing that, but metal side cover, metal R18 badge on the side. You can see it's drilled through with its little caps on there. It's that attention to detail. It's not just a sticker shoved on the side of a plastic side cover. That's nice. I spoke about the rear shocker that runs up through here. You can adjust your compression from here. You don't have to climb around underneath the bike trying to do it. Put a socket or a spanner on there if you're maybe carrying a passenger or a lot of weight on board. You can wind it up and down. There's the toolkit, all nice, simple and easy to get to. Now, one of the things we don't normally associate a big heavyweight cruiser, and I mean that's what this bike is, we don't associate that with being a city bike. And shortly I'm going to take it up through the hills and that type of thing and have a look at it in the cornering and see just how well that 16-inch wheel handles the bends. But in town, I was pleasantly surprised. It handles it easily. I mean, you can even filter on this bike, which surprised me a little bit because those huge big cylinders stick out each side of the bike. but coming down between here, and this looks a lot closer than I actually am. Yes, I'm being gentle and working my way through. Don't want to scratch anything, but look, it's fine. And yes, we're allowed to filter in my part of the world. But one of the things I wanted to find out about that big motor, all those big cylinder and head sticking out the side, which, by the way, if you're not familiar with a boxer style motor, it's like a Porsche or maybe a Lycoming or a Continental motor. Basically, the pistons are going each side, and you get this beautiful flywheel throw that just pulls the bike over to the left when you give it a rev. That is just very, very special. But I wanted to know how much heat came off them, so I spent a few hours here in town, in, around, stop, start, tried to get it as hot as I could possibly get it, and no, not an issue at all. Now, when you see a van like that come up on the left-hand side, and he's not doing anything wrong, but it is nice to know that you have the braking ability, that in the event that he came straight out, you can get on the brakes and stop. All important stuff when you're in town. As far as these little small side streets, yeah, look, not an issue. It's actually not a bad city bike. Now, this bike, as I mentioned, is the R18 Classic. There's a few things different on this bike to some of the other models. I'll run through some pricing shortly of just what this bike costs in Australian dollars. But one of the things that's on this bike, as the Classic, are these soft black rear panniers. They're a leather look. I don't know if they are leather or not, but they're a leather look. About 15 litres per side. You're not going to fit a helmet, would you? No, you're not going to fit a helmet in there. But if you're putting some wet weather clothes or a sandwich, or a drink, knickknacks, bits and pieces, more than adequate, one either side. You've got this nice little rear seat here with a little grab pad. Slide your gloves under when you stop somewhere so they don't blow off. There are a couple of the Classic features. I'll run through others as we work our way through the bike. And something I just wanted to mention here, if you decide you want to take the panniers off the bike and just run it, I'll call it naked on the back, BMW have even supplied these little bolts here. So when you remove the panniers and the brackets, you can put the two replacement bolts back in the holes so as it's nice and neat on the side of the bike. Nice. The Gearbox 6-speed, it has this rocker type gear setup. Now, I'll be honest, on the first day I thought, I don't like this because I'm trying to get my toe onto here and under to shift up. Second day, I started using the heel shifter. On the third day, I loved it. You put your heel on there to shift up through the gears, toe on there to shift down through the gears. Now, I just want to clarify something that I said there about the heel and toe shifter. I think I mentioned I've got a cruiser in the back of the garage. This is the heel and toe shifter on my cruiser. It is one fixed piece of metal and we just cannot make friends. BMW, and you pay that little bit more, don't you, for a BMW? This is why. There is the downshifter there, the toe. There is the heel shifter. You push down on that to shift up through the gears. But what BMW have done is they are two separate levers. They are on a splined shaft. You undo those two bolts there. I think they were number 40 Torx. And you can move the shifters to suit your positioning, where maybe where you're seating or the type of boot or shoe that you wear, and it makes it very, very nice to use. Just a lovely feature, not a fixed piece of metal like this. It's very tall in the top gears. In fact, 5th and 6th gear on this bike are an overdrive. Top gear is a 0.78 ratio. It's really tall, and I think that's what gives you such good fuel economy for such a big bike. And you can get away with that when you've got the high torque levels that come from this 1800cc motor. That's good. This little lever here, if you're wondering what that is, that's reverse gear. So basically you push that down, up on the handlebars, you hit the starter button, and an electric motor, I'm not sure if it's the electric motor that starts the bike or it's an additional electric motor, but that drags you backwards, which is, actually I might show you that because that's really handy, especially on this type of surface, and it's a big heavy bike. Here, little BMW 12 volt outlet, if you're using, I don't know, an air pump or whatever you may need. That's nice. Now I mentioned that reverse. This is where it's wonderful. I'm on an undulating surface. It's slightly uphill. And look, I suppose I can move it, but it's really heavy.
If you just pop this little lever, we showed you that chrome lever, then push the button here, back she goes. Look at that. How good is that? Pull the lever up, pop it in gear, and away you go.
Now, I might just throw in here, I do a lot of off-road and dirt road riding on big bikes. If you're not familiar with these machines on loose surfaces, yeah, it's probably not a good idea to turn off that traction control. So Steve, in the real world, where am I going to use reverse? I'm not going to be riding it in paddocks and dirt roads. True. I've just pulled into one of my favourite coffee shops in Adelaide City, and I've pulled in where there's yellow lines on the ground. Now, I actually knew they were there. This is as an example. I just hit the reverse button, reverse the bike out, bring it down a little bit further into one of the car parks. It makes it easy to do. There was too much traffic to be able to reverse the bike in. I've had to come in forwards. This particular park has a spoon drain in the bottom of it. Very hard to push the bike out of. If you look up on the instrument panel there, neutral. It's in N. I push that silver lever down. There you go. You can see it has changed to R. Now that's where you'd normally see your gears. I just push the start button, reverse the bike out into bottom gear, and away I go. It just makes owning a big bike in the city a pleasure. Left-hand controls, nothing too hard here at all. You've got your cruise control up on the top, off, on. I just leave it on full time. When you want to set your speed, click that one. If you've used the brakes or come out of cruise control, you just flick it back. And I like it on the left-hand side because you don't have to alter with your hand on the throttle. That's really easy to use. High beam and low beam and pass, just a lever on the back here, same as most BMWs, I think. Traction control, yes, you can turn off your traction control, and that's lovely if you're having a bit of a mess around on loose surfaces or on wet roads and you like to bring that back end out a little bit, as I tend to do. Hazard lights up on top here, that's the menu button. Flick through that and that'll give you your trip A, trip B, tachometer, date, time, whatever it is you may want. It's easy, it's simple, it's not confusing at all. Mode button, that gave you your 3 riding modes, rock, roll or rain, or as I like to put it, road, sport or rain. Easy to understand, I think. Down here, the fog lights or driving lights that are on the front of this bike, push that, the driving lights come on. Indicators, right, left, cancel. They are auto cancelling as well, but you can cancel them manually. And down here, horn button. On the freeway, it is as you would expect it to be of a bike that carries its weight so low. It is super stable, it is smooth, the mirrors are clear, the little windscreen breaks the wind on your chest. This is 110 kilometres an hour, or about that 70 mile an hour, very comfortable. So starting the bike is basically keyless. That is a fob, the same as you'd have with most modern cars nowadays. Pop that in your pocket, in your bag, in your jacket, wherever it might be. And up on the right-hand control bar here is the start, well actually the power button. So we'll push that and this will then come alive. That powers the bike up, so it's like turning the ignition on. So there's our dash, it comes alive, needle does its little checky thing, and it's really simple. It's an analog style speedometer, 60 mile an hour, 100 kilometers an hour is up at the top of the screen. Neutral light, a couple of warnings here, that's traction control, that's the ABS. They will go off as soon as you start moving. We looked at those menu buttons on the left-hand bar. I said menu, I should have said mode buttons actually. I'll just expand it up here so you can see you've got 3 riding modes. Rock, as you can see there, roll and rain. And I think all it really does is alter the amount of throttle response. Nice, simple to use. Up on the right hand grip here you have, of course, your throttle. It's ride by wire, so it's super crisp. There's no throttle cables. You can see how neat and tidy this all is. There's no wires and things. All you've got is your hydraulic line, one for your front brake and one for your clutch, which is good. Controls wise, being the Classic, it's got heated grips. So you've got 3 stages of heated grips and they are typical BMW. They are so hot, which is lovely. To start the bike, it's pretty straightforward. We have that key fob, we saw that. That powers the bike up, so it's like turning the ignition on. In other words, you can see it coming alive down here on the speedo. Pull the clutch in, press the start button,
and away she goes. The bike is now running. It's really that simple. It's crazy simple. Turn the bike off. The bike is now off. It's still alive, so we've got the daytime running light on the front and the rear. It's not the headlight, it's the daytime running light. To turn the bike off, you then press that button there and it's off. That's it. You walk away from the bike.
Where these beautiful big cruisers are right at home is a country road up in the hills on a beautiful sunny day, mild temperature, just going for a leisurely ride. Now, down the track here a little bit, there's a left-hand bend. It's got a dip in it, and this is one where I'm yet to get a cruiser that won't touch the pegs as you go round. And as I expected, a little rub there on the left-hand peg. But you know what? I really don't care. This bike is just beautiful to ride. I mean, look at those revs, 1,700 to 1,800 at 50 mile an hour, 80 kilometers per hour in top gear. You're just riding this bike on torque.
Now, if you're a do-it-yourself type maintenance person, and let's be honest, maintenance on late model bikes can be a really expensive thing. The R18 is simple. There's your drain plug there, nice and easy to get to. There is your oil filter, although you may want one of those oil filters that have got the claws on it that are a bit easy to get up in there.
These sleeve filter removers, like this one here, you can pick them up on eBay, Amazon, your local auto shop, and they take up very little room because they don't have a jaw. They're more of a sleeve around the outside, half-inch socket in the bottom, job done.
Normal screw-on filter, drain the oil, pop on a new filter. Underneath this right-hand rocker cover, we saw the little Torx fitting there in the right-hand cover. Undo those two. This is actually a rocker cover. Take that off. The oil filler hole is in there.
The handle for removing that plug is in the standard toolkit that we saw there under the left cover.
Undo the plug, put your oil in. It holds about 4 litres of oil. It holds a lot of oil, and that is a really good thing for longevity. The more oil that a motor holds, generally, especially the low revs of this motor, I mean, I can see this doing unbelievable amount of miles or kilometres. It should last a very long time. All simple. And of course, as I mentioned, there's no dipping tanks or pumping the oil up. There is your oil window down there, little red circle in the glass hole, so you can see your oil level. Once again, whether you're at home, whether you're out and about, whether you're doing an oil change, easy. Valves are nice and simple to get to. It's a 4-valve head. When you take off this rocker cover, pull your rocker cover off. It's a reusable gasket, which is nice, and it's standard old nut and screw valve adjustment. There's 4 valves per cylinder. Easy. Set of feeler gauges, get your specs, adjust your valves. I think that's about every 15,000 kilometres or about 8,000 or 9,000 mile that you need to do that. Certainly initially anyway, but these are all the things that cost you a lot of money. It's not just the purchase price of the bike, it's the ongoing ownership. So much of this stuff you can do yourself. The air filter, if you remove this cover here, so you've got 1, 2, there's a couple of screws under there, 2 tiny little, where is it, up there, coming from the other side. This cover lifts off, your air filter is in there, you can access it easily. That can be done yourself. As I said before, this is a cover, not the actual motor here. Nice, simple, and cost effective.
This is just a picture I got off of BMW's website of the rear differential. That's not the nut that you undo there, that's to take it out, but take the wheel out. But simple, fill plug, drain plug, easy to do yourself. The gearbox has a separate oil. The filler plug is behind that little cover there on the 12-volt outlet, and the drain plug is underneath. All accessible.
And that remote, once again, turn it over, you can see there's a key in there. Push that little button, out comes the key, and it has the old simple style steering lock on the head stem.
And just finally on the key, and I understand, I mean, this is keyless, you just get on and push buttons, and I understand a lot of people aren't sure about these key fobs. Both of my motor cars have them, they're great. You've got a little button battery if it goes flat. If it were to go flat while you're out and about, undo the seat. That's in the toolkit to get to the little bolts to do that. And under the seat itself, there is a ring antenna and a keyhole so you can start it with the key.
Have a look at the style of this bike from the rear. It has the rear seat, as I said, being the Classic, but the way the panniers shape in there, you can see that enormous rear tyre, which looks nice, and different exhaust pipes on this one, which look good also. When I was showing you the remote before, something I didn't mention is, you see this here, there's actually 2 buttons. Press the BMW badge. If you watch the indicators, they will flash twice. It now has the alarm and immobiliser on. Come back to your bike, press once, and that turns off the alarm and immobiliser. Just a nice peace of mind thing. The R18 comes with these Michelin Commander tyres, 130/90, and once again, as we said, being the Classic, 16-inch rims. Really good tyres. Well, at least here in Australia, it comes with the Michelins anyway. So, fuel capacity wise, 16-litre tank. That's about 4.5 US gallons, I guess. It's not a huge tank for the size of the bike. It should give you about maybe 300 at best. I would say about 275 odd kilometres, 180 miles between fulls. It takes the premium fuel, the first or the second grade of premium. It's a 9.6:1 compression ratio, so BMW recommend that. The cap itself is just a screw-on cap. Nice, easy, nice chrome metal cap, which looks good. And that key fob that we looked at, the steering head lock used the key, well, so does the cap. You pop it in here, down, lock your cap, and away you go. Once again, that old school that we were talking about, it's just so uncommon on today's bikes. Look, BMW quote 5.6 litres per 100 Ks. On normal riding, which is over 50 mile to the gallon, I was getting about 5.4 litres. I think that's pretty reasonable. It's 800 pounds or 365 kilos, as we mentioned. It's 8 feet long. This is a big motorcycle. The colour, if you're wondering, I think this is specific only to the Classic, which this bike is Manhattan. It's a matte type paint, but it's still smooth. I can put my little suction cup on there that held the GoPro before, and it sticks, so easy enough to keep clean. Initially I thought, I'm not really into these matte colours, but it's really nice. It looks good.
And there's something you probably haven't seen lately in a motorcycle review. A kangaroo just sort of bouncing through in the background, coming to say hello, see what's going on. See you, mate.
Front lights, you've got that power button, so remember that's the same as turning your ignition on. Press that, it brings the bike alive. The rear tail lights are now on. That daytime running light that runs across the centre of the headlight should be on. You have to start the bike to get the headlights to come on. So there you are, the bike is now started and running. There's the low beam, click that little switch. There's your high beam. I had the bike out last night. The lights are brilliant, typical BMW. That works well. And of course, the driving lights here and here, that's part of the Classic package, which is nice and bright. And just have a look at the way the bike rocks. And this is what it does at idle. You can get those power pulses coming through. Very special. The clutch in this bike is a big single plate dry clutch, and it's enormous. It would have very big springs to be able to handle the amount of torque that comes from this motor. Not an issue. It's hydraulic. There's the master cylinder for the hydraulic clutch. Actually, both the front brake and the clutch, of course, are hydraulic, but you've got these adjustable levers on both sides, so you can custom space the levers to where you're comfortable. And it's nice, it's light. Even after a full day of city riding, the clutch is still nice and light. That's good on a big bike. I'll look at the lights from the rear. You've got, of course, the key fob. That's just in the pocket. Power on. The tail lights, actually it starts with the brake lights, then fades back to the tail lights. There it goes now back to tail lights. That daytime running light is on in the headlight. You've got your indicators, left, right, and of course, your brake lights, of course. So that's the outer LEDs. They come on and go nice and bright on both the front brake lever and the rear. What else haven't we done? Oh, the mandatory sound check. Now, sadly, the microphone doesn't pick up just how good things sound. This bike sounds awesome, but here we go. Hopefully that comes through just how good it sounds. You can hear the bike when you're in and around town and doing slow maneuvers. Once you get onto the freeway, it's silky smooth and quiet, lovely. And just the whole rear end of this bike, it is so neat and tidy. And I mean, who doesn't like a tidy rear end? The windscreen that comes on the Classic is this smallish type screen. It breaks the wind on your chest. Now, I'm about 5'10", taller in the body, shorter in the legs. My head is actually in clean air when I'm going along, but that breaks all the pressure on your chest. So when you're at highway speed, 70 mile an hour, 110, 20, 30, whatever, you're not hanging on, trying to hold yourself on the bike. That gets tiring when you're doing long runs. For me, it works perfectly. You may find if you're a bit shorter in the body that you get a bit of turbulence rolling off the top, which shakes your helmet around. I found it to be fine. BMW have accessory windscreens. You can go taller, you can go shorter, or in summer, if you'd prefer not to have the windscreen, it is really simple just to remove.
Now, one of the things that I probably wasn't expecting with this bike is its low speed handling. I mean, you can almost bring the bike to a complete stop. I put the bike here on full lock, look through my turn, slip the clutch, and I think it's a combination of things. It's got a very low center of gravity. Those cylinders come out the sides. They don't go straight up and down, and those 16-inch wheels make it very manageable. So what's my summary and conclusion? Let's start with the cost. In Australian dollars, it comes in at $28,500. I mean, that's less than many of the adventure bikes out there, and you just can't appreciate how good this bike is. I mean, a lot of people will ride one for an hour or 2 hours or even 3 hours. This is a motorcycle that you build a relationship with. Is it because it's incredibly stable at speed, but also at a leisurely pace? Is it because of the impeccable build quality? Maybe it's the way it shakes left and right at idle. I mean, it's almost as if you can count the beats. Is it the fact that there's nothing else like it on the planet? An 1800cc boxer twin, the largest motor BMW have ever put in a motorbike. Or maybe it's because you can do the majority of maintenance yourself if that's your thing. I had one bloke while I was doing this review that spent almost an hour going over the bike when I stopped for a cup of coffee. And at the end of it, he took pictures, he was writing things down. And do you know what he said to me? This bike is art. Now that sort of sums it up for me. So could I own this motorcycle? Look, in a heartbeat. You feel very special when you ride it. You have to turn back and look at the bike when you go in to pay for your fuel. It's elegant, it's classy, but it's individual. It's not the same as anything else out there. And that motor, I mean, I just love the motor. Did this bike and I build a connection? Look, we certainly did. It's a proper heavyweight cruiser. And I could almost guarantee you in years to come, when you're sitting on your porch and the grandkids say, "Grandpa or Grandma, what's the best motorcycle you ever owned?" One of the first names to come into your head will be my BMW R18.